Here's an adorable cat with devil ears. Enjoy the rest of the video. What did that one teacher do to you that you'll never forget? 3rd grade Mrs. Jones. My dad had just deserted us and we were suddenly destitute. She bought my school pictures for us and paid my lunch bill all year. She never said a word about it. Only found out later. Bless her. Senior year I was placed in a freshman typing class. Everyone else was chatty and goofed off, but I wanted to learn to type, so I really put in a lot of effort. I only had 2 classes in the morning, and the rest of the day I was a waitress, as I was pretty much on my own in my senior year. I got called into work on the day of our class final, so I went to work and missed the final. When I showed up to class the next day, I apologized to the teacher for missing the final. He asked me, "Do you want to know the grade you got?" When I replied yes, he said, "I gave you an A because if you had been here, that's what you would have gotten." I never forgot that. Thank you, Mr. Wyatt. I faked my way through 4th and 5th grade math. I never understood how to do long division, but managed to hide that from the teachers and answer test questions by reverse multiplication. Basically guess a number and multiply it out and see how close I would get and keep doing it until I got the answer. My 6th grade math teacher figured out that I was faking and had no idea how to actually divide anything. She had me come in one afternoon to help with cleaning the erasers. All the kids fought for this privilege, so I was thrilled, sat me down, and tutored me until I grasped the concept. Bless you, Mrs. Gillespie. That's not faking, you discovered binary search, lol. The professor I had for my Calculus 100 class in university was awesome. He was a good teacher and funny and engaging. If it was a first year class with over 100 people in it, I was just a face in a big crowd. I was on campus after hours a couple years after I graduated. They run programs for kids in the evenings and was dropping off my oldest, and I saw him. He stopped, looked at me hard, and said first name last name. Not a bad student. Not great. But definitely not bad. And kept walking. This was a good 6 years after I graduated. Absolutely amazed he would have remembered me at all after teaching how many hundreds of students in between. That is just crazy. At my high school, we had an annual week-long science trip, fully paid for by fundraising. Only 4 people were selected to go each year. My sophomore year, I was chosen. I knew there was no way I was going to be allowed to go. I had never been out of the state, never been on a single vacation, never been on a plane, and never been away from home for more than 24 hours. My parents were incredibly conservative and immediately said no. I had a science teacher who just didn't accept the no. Instead of just giving up and selecting someone else, he called and tried to convince my parents. When that didn't work, he came to my house and had dinner with my family to convince my dad that I would be an asset and he would be doing me a disservice by not letting me go. He sat and ate my mum's terrible cooking and talked to my parents for over 2 hours until he got a real think about it. Then he just kept following up. I had never had someone in my corner like that before, who was willing to go to bat for me like that. He wore them down, and it was the best week of my teenage life. I'd never seen the ocean. 20 years later, and I can still recall every detail of that trip. It was a major pivot point for me. Had a high school art teacher who would let me stay in his classroom during lunches. Always gave me half his sandwich and other extra food because he knew I didn't eat much otherwise. Edit. He would also keep a drawer in the classroom stocked with snacks so that I could swing by and grab something between classes if I needed. No, he never did anything questionable, and no, I never fell asleep after eating the sandwiches. He was just a kind person. My teacher did the opposite. I had too much food and always took my peanut butter sandwich. Probably because the kid next to me was allergic, but what a beach. I called somebody stupid once when they got a question wrong and the teacher instantly made me stand up and spell stupid backwards. Got it wrong with the pressure and learned a lesson that day. Memorize stupid backwards before calling someone else stupid. Got it? Just turn around, facing the other way, and just spell it normal. Had 10 minutes to spare before lunch bell, and he told us all to go joke off, or whatever it is you do. I don't know what he wanted to say, and he apologized to us, but it was funny as hell. Probably just a funny dude who let his real personality come through too much for the job. I can't remember what I did, but in first grade my teacher got mad at me and said, "You wanna act like a baby? Fine, come over here." She made me sit in a corner on the floor and gave me 2 little toys to play with. That must have been nice. Oh, and embarrassing. Yeah, it was embarrassing but funny. She would yell at me, "Keep playing." If I looked up to see what everyone else was doing, haha. Called my mum while she was at work to tell her I'd written one of the best things he'd ever seen as a teacher. This is one of the most fun things to do. OFFS, what has he done now? Oh. My physics teacher in high school hosted an annual trip to Walt Disney World in Orlando for 15 to 20 kids for over a week. I was one of the better and most interested students in his class. He was an incredible teacher who found examples in physics everywhere. He also used to work for Disney prior to teaching. Since my family was not so well off and I could not afford the trip to Walt Disney World, I declined when he asked me if I was going to join. He probed a bit and he somehow found the funds to have me join without me even inquiring. I don't know if he pulled school money or there was a surplus, but either way, that was one of my best memories from that school. I still keep in touch with him 15 years later. There was no school money or surplus. This man paid for the trip out of his own pocket because he's a rockstar. Teachers are awesome. In my senior year, my English teacher asked me if I was manic depressive after turning in a personal essay, only for me to get diagnosed with bipolar disorder a week later. She took every phone call, no matter the time of night, while I was in rehab. If it wasn't for her being there in my lowest time, I probably would not be here today. This teacher was extremely strict, hated by my class, but loved me because I was one of the few who respected her and did well in her class. When school ended, she gave me a crystal bear. Nothing too fancy or expensive, but I felt as if I was glowing leaving that classroom with bear in my hand. I still have it and will treasure it forever. You know, usually a strict teacher is a whole lot more nice when people follow the rules. I was anorexic when I was in school. She took me aside after class and told me that if I didn't stop doing what I was doing to myself, I was going to die. That my body was going to start shutting down, my organs would fail, that it would not be beautiful, and I was going to die an awful and painful death. I still catch myself slipping back into that mindset 10 years later sometimes. But I will never forget that. She saved my life. I got a wonderful thank you note from a student for doing the same thing, except she was bulimic. Her dad put so much pressure on her to be perfect, and she was really struggling. Senior year of high school, I was on the wrestling team, and I had cut about 30 pounds that year, from 170 down to 140. I happened to have the same math teacher 3 years in a row, so we really got to know each other. First name basis and all that. She knew how much weight I cut for the season. I told her, and it was obvious just from my face. I wasn't fat before my cut either. I had a 6-pack. She had a strict no eating in class policy. That'll be important in a minute. The day after the wrestling season ends, I walk into math class and sit down. She walks over to my desk and puts a whole apple pie right in front of me. She knew it was my favorite, handed me a fork, and said she'll ignore the no eating rule for one day. I finished that whole pie in maybe 30 minutes. Linda, I'll never forget that. You absolutely made my day. Told me I was smart and could succeed. I had spent the past couple years at a private school, trying so hard to prove myself. Despite doing well academically, I didn't fit their cookie cutter mold, so I was looked down on by other students and administration. When I told the guidance counselor that I wanted to be pre-med and go to medical school after college, she pretty much told to lower my expectations because I wouldn't succeed. At the end of my college math class my senior year of high school, I ended up in my professor's office to look at what I had missed on my final. He told me that I had done well and that I could my PhD in math if I wanted. That was not what I wanted to do, but when I told him I wanted to be pre-med, he looked at me and said, "You're going to well in that. I know you will succeed." 6 years later, and I'm halfway through my second year of medical school, and his words still ring in my mind. In high school, one of my teachers had this duckbill whistle, literally shaped like a duck's bill, and it made a quacking noise. She used it to get the class attention. One time I guess we were being extra rowdy and she blew the ever living shit out of it and the class went stone dead quiet. She got this shocked look on her face and then took her hairpin out and dropped it and the whole class heard it hit the ground and she got this big grin on her face and we all just busted out laughing.